This happened to me a few years back. I've spent a lot of time in the Appalachian Mountains, mostly hiking and camping alone. I've always felt comfortable out there, like I knew the land and the land knew me. But what I experienced one weekend changed the way I look at those mountains forever. So it was late September, just when the air starts to get a little chillier. But it's not freezing yet. Perfect camping weather. I decided to go on a solo trip for a couple of days, deep into a section of the Appalachian Trail I hadn't been to before. It was a remote area, far from any of the tourist spots or popular hiking trails. I wanted to get away from everything, just me and the wilderness. The first day was great. I hiked about 10 miles in, found a clearing to set up camp, and got everything situated before dusk. The woods were peaceful, with that calming silence that only comes when you're really far from civilization. No phone service, no noise, just the wind through the trees. I had a fire going, made some dinner, and by the time the sun was dipping below the horizon, I was ready to turn in for the night. Just as the light was fading, I started hearing this faint sound coming from the woods behind my camp. It was hard to describe, kind of like whistling, but not the wind. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate, like someone was trying to mimic a bird call, but not quite getting it right. I brushed it off at first. You hear weird noises in the woods all the time. Animals, wind through the branches, stuff like that. But as the night went on, it got stranger. I'd been in my tent for a couple of hours, trying to fall asleep, when I heard footsteps. Not just random footsteps, slow and heavy, like something was moving just outside the perimeter of my camp. I froze listening. I've encountered animals on the trail before, like deer, bears, you name it, but this sounded different. It wasn't skittish, and it wasn't wandering. Whatever it was circling my camp. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly unzipped the tent, stepping out into the night. The fire had died down to embers, and the forest was dark, but I could still hear the footsteps. I shined my light around, but I didn't see anything at first. No movement, no animals, nothing. The footsteps stopped when I came out, but the air felt thick, like there was something out there watching me. I stood there for a good 10 minutes, just listening, heart pounding, waiting for something to happen. But eventually, the sounds faded, and I convinced myself it was probably just an animal passing through. I put more wood on the fire to keep it going, and went back to my tent, though I barely slept that night. The next morning, everything seemed fine. It was as if the night before hadn't happened. I packed up camp and started hiking again, pushing further into the mountains. The day was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, like a shadow slipping between the trees. But whenever I turned to look, there was nothing. By the time I set up camp that night, I was feeling uneasy. I built a bigger fire this time, hoping it would keep whatever was out there at bay. I made sure my gear was packed tight, kept my knife close, just in case. As the night wore on, that same strange whistling started again, soft, distant, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't a bird. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again. Closer this time, deliberate, like they wanted me to hear them. I grabbed my flashlight, knife in hand, and stepped outside the tent. The fire was still burning bright, casting long shadows through the trees, but the footsteps stopped as soon as I was out in the open. I stood there scanning the tree line with my flashlight, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but something was moving, slowly, just beyond the reach of the firelight. A tall figure, maybe 7-8 feet tall, hunched over, moving between the trees. It kind of looked human, but there was something off about it. The limbs were too long, the movements too jerky, like it wasn't used to walking on two legs. I felt my stomach drop. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't an animal, and it sure as hell wasn't human. It was watching me, staying just far enough away that I couldn't make out its full form, but close enough that I knew it was real. I backed toward the fire, knife still in hand, heart racing. I thought about grabbing my gear and making a run for it, but I didn't want to turn my back on it. I stood there, watching, waiting, trying to figure out what to do. And then it did something that still makes my skin crawl to this day. It started mimicking me. I swear to you, it took a step forward and tilted its head in the exact same way I was standing, almost like it was mocking me, trying to learn. Then it let out that same whistling noise I'd heard earlier, but louder now, like it was calling out to me. I didn't wait around to see what was going to happen next. I grabbed my pack, kicked dirt over the fire, and bolted out of there as fast as I could. I didn't care about the trail, I just ran. The whole time, I could hear the whistling behind me, getting fainter but never disappearing entirely. Whatever that thing was, it didn't chase me directly, but I could feel it, like it was letting me go, watching me run. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the mountain where the trees thinned out and I could see the sky again. By then, the sun was starting to rise and the whistling had stopped. I didn't look back. I just kept going until I made it back to my car. When I got home, I tried to make sense of what happened, but I couldn't. I've been back to the Appalachians since, but never to that part of the trail, and never alone. There's something out there in those woods, and I don't want to see it again.